Well, he's no Jason Momoa, but we do get the introduction of the Golden Age version of Aquaman in Superman the Animated Series. We're talking all about it. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. This is the place that you're looking for. We're going through and looking at and talking about each and every episode of cartoons that we grew up on in the 80s and 90s. And right now we're working our way through a series talking about Superman the Animated Series. And today we're talking about the episode A Fish Story, which originally aired on May 8th, 1999.
Bunch of hooey. You can quote me on that.
I've said it many times, but we're seeing the introduction of all these other characters from the DC world being introduced into Superman the Animated Series, and we're winding down. We only have a few more episodes left of the series, and just around the corner, when these were originally airing, they were getting ready to launch the Justice League, which leads me to believe that that's why they're introducing these characters like Aquaman and Green Lantern and Batman. Well, of course, Batman was already introduced, but you get my point. But what's interesting is these aren't the versions of the characters that we will see later in Justice League. But we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second Brainiac bomb rundown of the episode. I'll give you a complete synopsis in 60 seconds or that bomb will blow up, which the bomb will blow up because I rarely get these in 60 seconds. Here we go. Jimmy and Lois are on a boat with Bibbo out to explore some of the nautical life, but the fish are acting weird. They start hitting the boat, and Jimmy uses his watch and calls Superman. They save him. They go to an aquarium and go, "What's going on? All these nautical fish are acting really bizarre." And Lois starts sneaking around to see what's going on, and we see Luthor behind all this, talking to the doctor that is examining these fish, who tells them everything's fine. And he goes, "Hey, you got to get these fish under control, and you know why it's happening. It's him. You got to take him more inland." And meanwhile, Lois is looking around. She finds Aquaman locked in this tank. So they find Lois looking at this. So they capture Lois and Aquaman, which was already captured, but they take him away. Jimmy's trying to figure out how to drive in the parking lot and is banging around. And so they're taking these fish, taking Aquaman and Lois away. And then meanwhile, Jimmy tells Clark, Superman, what's going on. So Superman goes to help them. And they are, Aquaman is explaining to Lois that they're testing these bombs offshore, and it's making life for Atlantis. It's making life for Atlantis. Told you to blow up. They're making life for Atlantis very difficult, and so he says this has got to stop. And then it all comes to a head when Aquaman escapes and brings his armies from Atlantis ready to blow Luthor and his ship out of the water. And he says we got to have peace and stop this, or I'm going to blow you out of water, literally. And Superman flies in and he goes, "Oh, we could do this another way. Let's all be harmony." He goes, "Okay, you better be right." And he starts to turn. They fire a harpoon at him, and war breaks out, and there's big fight and explosions. And then Aquaman and Superman have a little talk and says, "Well, I hope this is the end of it." No, I don't know if it will be.
We both know what's causing this.
You know, a lot of people in recent years have really been hating on Aquaman. And I don't really know where that came from. I've always been a fan of Aquaman way back when I was a little kid. And this is a true story. When I was younger, when I was in kindergarten, in fact, I loved to draw and I loved doodling. And so my teacher, when we would finish an assignment, I'd turn over the paper and have a blank sheet, basically a blank sheet. And I would draw different superheroes. And then my kindergarten teacher, Miss Daniels, Miss Baker now, and she would grade that, give me a letter grade or write a little comment about that artwork as well as grading the actual assignment. And I distinctly remember drawing different superheroes, but one of my favorite ones to draw, believe it or not, was Aquaman. He's such a simple design, but I remember distinctly drawing the scales on his shirt or his top. I draw all very detailed, drawing all the scales. I wish I could find those. I'm sure those papers are around somewhere at my house or my parents' house. And I think at that point, my knowledge of Aquaman was from Super Friends, but I thought he was a cool character, swimming. And I remember distinctly, going out to the lake or swimming in the pool and pretending to be Aquaman and talking to fish and all that. But it's as I got older that he became the butt of a lot of jokes. And I really don't know where the origin of that was. But Then the joke was on them when they cast Jason Momoa, which I thought was brilliant casting, by the way, to come in and portray Aquaman. A fantastic movie. I mean, the box office results show, and kind of brought him back to his status as being a really cool, powerful, awesome hero. But that is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Superman, the animated series, and they introduce Aquaman, and it's not the Aquaman from the Justice League. This is the Golden Age, the traditional Aquaman that we grew up on, the original Aquaman with the orange top with the scales individually drawn on, and the green bottom and blonde hair and swimming and talking to fish. Like that's the Aquaman that I grew up on. And somewhere, I think it was in the 90s, maybe it was in the 80s, that they revamped his whole design and gave him long hair, took his shirt away, gave him big muscles, and replaced his hand with a harpoon, the goatee, and really kind of grunged him up and made him more of like a pirate sort of style, I think. But this version introduces him as that classic Golden Age Aquaman. It makes me wonder if that was the original intention of the characters that they were going to have for Justice League. I have to think at this point they knew they were doing Justice League if they weren't already working on it. I ran across some information online, and honestly, I don't remember where it was at. There is some artwork by Bruce Timm that shows the Justice League that involves Hal Jordan, this design of Aquaman, and some other characters that is rumored to be what the original Justice League animated show was going to be. And somewhere along the lines, for whatever reason, they changed that out. They brought in Martian Manhunter and had the Jon Stewart Green Lantern and some Hawkgirl and some of the other characters that way. But I don't know. It's just interesting that it seems very deliberate that they're introducing these characters. But this is a great depiction of Aquaman, is the point I'm trying to make.
Let's hope they succeed. For their sake.
I do have to say, I do like in the beginning of this episode that they took a little bit of a different approach in that they have Lois and Jimmy on the boat, and they establish that, Clark's not here because he gets seasick, and didn't have him also on the boat and then have to figure out a way to knock him overboard so he could become Superman and come and save the day. And they've used that trope a number of times at this point. So I was glad that they kind of it's kind of a cheap line that they just went, oh yeah, Clark's not here because he gets seasick. But at the very least, they were able to explain that away early so that one gets an opportunity for Jimmy to be able to use his watch to call Superman, which we introduced earlier in Superman's Pal. We also have already excuse Clark from this scene so he can just arrive as Superman.
How'd you find me?
Now, as much as I like this version of Aquaman, now don't get me wrong, I do like the newer version. It's just a different version, but I do like that. But I do kind of gravitate more towards the Golden Age version. As much as I do like that version, I thought it was an interesting choice to introduce this character having already been captive. On one hand, I like that they jump into the story and they didn't spend the first half of the episode showing Aquaman swimming around and talking to fish and riding dolphins and all that, and then get captured and then get to this point. Like, it was kind of a neat mystery where we go, why is this going on and what's happening, that Lois then discovers very shocking sight of seeing a man in a tank of water, but it was just sort of weakened him right from the beginning of already being captured.
Did he say king? Just when you think you know a guy.
Now, this episode has a few kind of plot hole-y kind of elements, and I guess maybe plot hole isn't the right word, but just some elements of the story that are not explained really well. I actually had to watch this episode twice to fill in the pieces and some things that didn't make much sense. One of those was, we established that Luthor's doing something bad off the shore of the coast or out in the ocean that is disrupting Atlantis and sea life and things like that. And I missed what that was the first time. And then the second time, all I got was that he was testing some weapons that he was blowing up offshore. Again, not a plot hole because it is in there, but I thought they didn't spend enough time for my liking to go, why is he doing this, and why does he have to test these over the ocean, or why isn't there a desert somewhere that he can test these weapons? You know, it's just like setting up the conflict between Luthor and Aquaman that I thought could have been fleshed out a little bit more. Not unlike the scene where we see Jimmy Olsen driving to find a parking spot while Lois is in finding Aquaman. And again, that was another one I had to watch a couple of times ago. Why is he just driving around, and why does it need to be that he doesn't have his driver's license? The only reason I can see why they needed to do that was to separate Lois and Jimmy, so that Jimmy could go back to the Daily Planet and inform Clark that he can't get a hold of Lois, or he lost her or whatever. But again, it was just sort of this, like, I don't know if weak or clunky, or just like didn't connect really well for me. Maybe I'm being nitpicky, but it's just that watching those, and that's the thing, watching these episodes as an adult, there's probably a lot more elements that I excused as a kid that I'm looking at them now going, does this episode hold up, and does it appeal as well to an adult as it did to a child? And elements like that, just, it kind of took me out of it to go, wait a minute, why is this happening? I get why we're doing it. I get that we have to get from point A to point B, and the connective tissue between the two just needed to be thrown in there somewhere.
Gas, left foot, clutch. Yeah, okay, I'm getting the hang of this.
And then there's another scene where Superman is underwater. Now, I'm not really clear on this, and so let me know if you know the answer to this. But from my understanding, Superman doesn't have the ability to breathe underwater. He just has the ability to hold his breath for a really long time, right? So we put him underwater, and he's under there for a really long time. So I don't know what the limitations are there. We've seen versions where he goes to space, doesn't need any suit or helmet or anything. And then there's versions of this where he goes in space and he needs a full spacesuit. So I understand that being out in space is different than being underwater, but it is similar in the sense of the limitations of his power. And here we have, again, one element where we can create a little bit of a weakness for Superman. And it's like we just kind of ignore it in this episode and go, oh yeah, he's underwater and he's fighting. But it seemed like it could have been an interesting element if he had to keep going up to get breath of air to be able to dive again and do what he's got to do.
I've disarmed the bombs.
It was nice in this episode that we got to see Luthor again, and we haven't really seen him in the last couple episodes. He's been was a prominent part in the first season, was almost in every episode in the beginning of the series. And here we are. We haven't seen him much. Certainly hasn't been a big, crucial part of the plots, even if he does kind of appear here and there to help with information or something of that sort. It makes a neat plot for him to be the reason why Aquaman is now on the surface to try to interact with this, and it kind of lumps everybody on the surface together with Luthor, which I thought was a kind of an interesting dynamic. But again, this is a weird choice of story to introduce Aquaman for, because he's kind of almost the antagonist. I mean, the battle is between Aquaman and Luthor, and we have Superman and Lois and Jimmy and all of them kind of in the middle, and certainly Superman trying to be the peacekeeper between these two people. And we go, okay, Luthor's the bad guy, Aquaman's the good guy, but he's also ready to go to war with the surface and Luthor, and ready to just blow these people out of the water, rather than going, hey, let's talk about it. Now, granted, they did capture him and hold him captive and not handle the situation correctly. So I'm not siding with either one, but there's moments of this episode where Superman and Aquaman are battling, or Superman certainly is trying to stop Aquaman from going too far, that just is an interesting paradigm switch. And again, I appreciate that they're bringing Aquaman into the series. I appreciate that it's the Golden Age version of the character. But I question whether this was the best choice of story to introduce Aquaman into the series.
I'll have to stop you.
You'd side with them?
So when it comes time to rank this episode, a lot of times when we have Superman partnering with another character, it seems to elevate the episode. As refreshing as it is to see Aquaman in the series, this isn't really him partnering with Aquaman, which maybe would have been, in my opinion, a better structure of the story, rather than kind of making him the adversary. But at the same time, it makes it a little bit different. It's kind of a more of a unique plot. It isn't the typical Superman episode where he's just punching things, but it's like this episode, I don't think painted Aquaman in the best light and wasn't the strongest introduction of him as a character, and had a couple of connecting points of the episode that, for me now as an adult looking at the story or analyzing a little bit deeper, just kind of missed the mark for me. So for all those reasons, this episode falls at the number 31 spot of my favorite episodes so far. A little bit further down on the list than I thought this would, because I am a fan of Aquaman, and it's not that, hey, that rhymes. And it's not that because he's in this episode made it bad. It's just that the episode, if you take Aquaman out of the episode and just told this story, I don't think that it made as much sense as it needed to. And then you introduce Aquaman, and that helps injecting new energy into it, but I just don't feel like it holds up to the other episodes, and especially the other ones where Superman is teaming up with or introducing other characters in the episode. It falls just below Little Big Head Man, which I was sort of went back and forth on because I wasn't crazy about that episode, but with Mix-Yes-Spitlick, I think I got it right. Was that right? In the episode in Bizarro, like I said, that pairing of them just added enough of a fun element, and introducing the fifth dimension and showing more of those elements just made it enough more fun than this episode. Enough more fun. That's probably not a real sentence, but it's the best way to say what I want to say. But I do have this beating out the Prometheon, because that is just a straight up Superman punching a big creature and saving the day. So that's where this episode falls. So let me know, how do you think this episode was as far as an introduction for Aquaman? Was there a different story they should have used? Do you think this was the best way for them to introduce the character? Would you have liked to see Superman and Aquaman more partner up? Or do you think it was great the way it was and it should be just left alone? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes like this, just hit subscribe, and feel free to jump over and watch some of the other episodes that I have here on my channel. I think you might enjoy those as well. And next up, we're going to be talking about the episode Unity, so you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.